Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the This Week in Rust podcast. This episode will cover both last week and this week's issues of the newsletter. As always, I'm Nell Shamrell-Harrington, lead editor of This Week in Rust and a senior staff engineer at Mozilla. We have a lot to highlight today, so let's dive in. Last week's issue, This Week in Rust issue 341, had several Rust community announcements. First, RustConf 2020's registration is now open. This year's conference will be a virtual event on Thursday, August 20th. We have some great speakers lined up, including Sean Griffin, Ashley Hauk, Jane Lusby, and much more. Make sure to register today and join us as we beam RustConf to screens across the globe. The 2020 Rust Contributor Survey is now open. This short, anonymous survey should only take a few minutes to fill out, but will greatly help us understand what kinds of problems people experience when they're contributing to Rust and what we can do to address them. This survey is targeting current, past, and future contributors to Rust. We're particularly interested in hearing from new or prospective code contributors. Whether you're a frequent contributor already or someone who has only thought about contributing, please take a few minutes to fill out the survey before June 10th, 2020. The Rust core team has released a retrospective on the 2018 rustlang.org redesign. This retrospective is blameless and forward-looking, and highlights the lessons learned for the next time we, the Rust community, take on a similar project. These lessons can likely be applied to nearly any project that must be coordinated over a large group of volunteers. Have you ever thought about contributing to Rust? Give Ellie Nievier's blog post on contributing to Rust a read. You'll hear the story of their first pull request to the Rust repo, joining the triage work group, and developing additional pull requests that dove deeper into the Rust language. Their hope is that more people, especially beginners in both Rust and open source, will not be afraid of engaging with the Rust project. Quote, "There are things for people of all skill levels to work on." End quote. LogRocket has posted a tutorial on building a WebSocket server with Rust. This tutorial uses the Warp web framework, especially its capability to support WebSockets. Follow along with this tutorial to build a basic message relay service. Clients will be able to connect to it via WebSockets and receive real-time messages which are published on the service. Kitsu has written a guide to custom types in Diesel. Diesel is an ORM, or Object Relational Mapping tool, written in Rust that supports some of the most popular relational databases. Read their article to learn more about how you can implement your own custom types and write conversions that allow you to insert and query them in your own databases. Have you heard of a technique for finding bugs called fuzzing? As Hycariot defines it in their blog post, Fuzzing Sequoia PGP, it is a technique where you generate random input to functions and observe the execution flow in order to detect problems. They will introduce you to the Cargo Fuzz framework and how to use it to test Rust functions. It detects problems like overflows, attempts to parse invalid data, attempts to read non-existent data, and much more. If you are in the mood for some computer science-focused content, you'll like the articles Sorting Algorithms in Rust by Kirill Vasiltsov and 3D Boyd Swimming in Perfect Harmony by Ishan Bankua. Sorting Algorithms in Rust features Rust implementations of the classic quick sort, bubble sort, and merge sort algorithms. Boyd's is an artificial life program which simulates the flocking behavior of birds. The 3D Boyd Swimming in Perfect Harmony series implements the classic Boyd's algorithm in Rust to, quote, simulate a group of virtual agents, or Boyds, that will swim around an enclosed space behaving like a school of fish. I can confirm these Boyds are very interesting and very cute. I have been happy to see the growth of Rust content for non-English speaking audiences. Roberto Huertas has begun a YouTube series called Aprende Rust en Español, or Learn Rust in Spanish. They estimate it will grow to 150 10-minute videos that explore Rust concepts from the most basic to the most advanced. Speaking of videos, issue 341 of This Week in Rust also includes a video on using Rust and WASM to build Bitcoin infrastructure by Nicole Zhu, a new entry in the Crust of Rust series on iterators, and a recording of the Rust and Tell Berlin monthly meetup. Give them a watch to see some Rustaceans in action. Moving on to this week's issue of This Week in Rust, issue number 342. Here are the highlights. This week, Rust 1.44.0 was announced. Rust 1.44 is a small release with cargo tree integrated into cargo itself and support for async await in no standard contexts. Additionally, in the announcement, the Rust core team also encouraged everyone to take the time to learn about racial inequality and to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Stack Overflow recently released the results of its 2020 survey, and for the 5th year in a row, Rust was named the most loved programming language. Chances are, if you're listening to this podcast, you already love Rust. But if you find yourself needing to help someone else understand it, David Rammel's article called "So What's Up with Microsoft's and Everyone Else's Love of Rust" will help you out. Additionally, Ryan Donovan's article, "Why the Developers Who Use Rust Love It So Much," highlights several quotes from members of the Rust community explaining what the language means to them. If you have experienced challenges with, or if you are curious about, writing Rust Cloud native applications in a team with differing levels of experience, Luca Palmieri has released Chapter 1 in his ongoing book called Zero to Production. This chapter covers Rust toolchains, project setups, IDE options including Rust Analyzer and IntelliJ Rust, and setting up a continuous integration pipeline. This week's issue also includes several links to other Rust newsletters that dive deeper into different areas of the Rust ecosystem. These newsletters include This Month in Rust OS Dev, This Month in Rust Game Dev, This Month in Rust Sim, which focuses on the use of Rust in numerical simulation, and the Rust in Blockchain newsletter. Pour yourself another cup of coffee and get reading. If you are still in lockdown and you'd like to use some of your time to sharpen your computer science skills, Satyan Ganesh has written an article on implementing graph and tree traversals in Rust. While you're in an academic state of mind, check out a new paper from Cornell University called "Memory Safety Challenge Considered Solved? An Empirical Study with All Rust CVEs." As mentioned before, we at This Week in Rust love featuring content that extends beyond our English-speaking audience. This week's issue features a Chinese language article on simple sorting algorithms in Rust, and an Indonesian language article on the reasons for programming in Rust. If you write or read articles on Rust in languages other than English, please make sure to submit them to This Week in Rust. We would love to feature them. To see even more Rustaceans in action, check out this week's featured videos. They include Rust web development boilerplate free with Rocket from the Genus V programming channel, Educational Rust Live Coding Building a Web App Part 4 by David Pedersen, Iterators by YouTube user Dan Logs, a live stream on Rust programming, browser computation with WebAssembly by Twitch user OccupyPaulST, and a new episode in the Jonathan Teaches Jason Rust series by Jason Turner. Pour yourself another cup of coffee or tea if you prefer, and dig into all of this fantastic content. If you have always wanted to contribute to Rust open source projects but haven't known where to start, look in the call for participation section for tasks you can pick up and get started with. Issue 341 featured several issues from the Ruma Events project. The Ruma Events project contains serializable types in the matrix specification that can be shared by client and server code. Additionally, Alex Ducno is looking for contributors to help with the database management system project called, appropriately, Database. This week, in issue 342, we feature several issues from the Mod project. Mod is an HTML template engine for Rust, which is implemented as a macro, which compiles your markup to specialized Rust code. Check out these issues today and get those pull requests in. This week is a quieter week for RFCs. No RFCs were approved this week, no RFCs were proposed this week, and no RFCs are currently in final comment period. There are, however, several tracking issues and pull requests that are in final comment period, all with a disposition to merge. Take a look at that section of the newsletter for all of the details. As for events, we continue to see most events being held online during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. You can tune in from anywhere to online meetups in Dallas, Texas, Wrocław, Poland, Berlin, San Diego, California, Zurich, Switzerland, and Turin, Italy. There are also a few meetups that may be held in person, including in Columbus, Ohio, Lehi, Utah, Vancouver, BC, and Durham, North Carolina. Please make sure to check the meetup pages for each of these meetups before you go, in case they are moved online. This week's Rust job section features a listing for a Pop! OS software engineer at System 76 and a software engineer at vehicle.software. Please click on the links in the newsletter for more information. And that's all for this week's extended podcast. Make sure to read both issues of the newsletter for even more great Rust content. This Week in Rust is edited by myself, Andre Bogus, and Colton Donnelly. This week and last week's newsletter contributors include, using their GitHub usernames, N. Nethercoat, Patrick Svensson, B. Prague, Garen Smith, Luke Math Walker, Luau Gia65, Humble, G. Terzian, Liberty, L4L, Nick Wilcox, Alex Dukno, Loop Yun, NC Zhu, Snen Jugal, and M. Grachev. Thank you so much to everyone who contributes to This Week in Rust. You're the reason we can get this newsletter out, and I can do this podcast every week. I'll be back next week bringing you more of the wonderful news from the wonderful world of Rust. Until then, please take care.